Of course, the Parliament does not have unfettered discretion to change the Constitution. In terms of Section 117, subsection 2, the Parliament can only amend the Constitution in terms of Section 328. And the Section 328 is the section we all know that it requires certain formalities to amend the Constitution. So he is not right that the Parliament has unlimited power to change the Constitution. They can only change this Constitution in terms of Section 328. Then on the issue of whether 2 years does constitute an extension of term, Honorable Mangwana was relying on the wording of Section 91, subsection 2. In terms of Section 91, subsection 2 of the Constitution, for purposes of that section, 3 or more years is deemed a full term. In other words, where a person has been given an additional 3 years, they are deemed to have been given an equivalent of 5 years. In other words, they are deemed to have been given a full term. What is important about this section is that a person who has been given 3 years and more is deemed to have been given a full term. It means, therefore, that a person who has been given less than 3 years has been given an extension of term but not a full term. So in other words, an extension of the length of time from 5 years by an additional 2 years is an extension of term, but it does not constitute a full term. Now, for the avoidance of doubt here, what this section says is that 3 years will be construed as a full term, but anything below 3 years is an extension of term, but it is not a full term, but it is an extension nevertheless. So an extension of the Constitution by 3 years is an extension of term. An extension by 2 years is an extension of term. Now, this thing, they both require a referendum. The extension, whether by 2 years or by 3 years. Now, the matter is put beyond doubt by Section 328, subsection 1. Section 328, subsection 1 says that the term limit provisions, are provisions that limit the length of time. So if it is 5 and then it is made 7, the length of time has been changed. In terms of Section 328, subsection 7, it talks of an amendment, the effect of which is to extend the length of time that a person holds office. This means that if you are adding 2 more years to the president's term, you are extending his time in office by those 2 years. It still requires a referendum. To conclude on this point, the office of the president, the term of office of the president can be extended in 2 ways. The first way is by simply adding another term. So if he had 2 terms, it is simply adding a 3rd term. In this regard, 3 years is regarded as a full term. So the president, he would have served 3 terms. But it is also by extending the length of 1 term, which is the case with Amendment 3. The Amendment 3 extends the length of time by 2 years, but it is an extension nevertheless. If we were to take Honorable Mangwana's argument to its logical conclusion, what he means is that 2 years is equal to 0. 2 years is not 0 years. 2 years is 2 years. 2 years represents a movement. The extension represents a movement from 5 to 2. Therefore, it is an extension nevertheless, and it requires referendum. One final fatal argument that Honorable Mangwana in his presentation makes is that this Amendment 3 does not affect the Bill of Rights. And he says because it does not affect the Bill of Rights, it does not require a referendum. He also goes on to say that it does not affect land rights. He is correct in asserting that the amendment does not affect the land rights, but he is wrong to say that it does not affect the Bill of Rights. Section 3, subsection 2 of our Constitution provides the founding values, the values upon which Zimbabwe is predicated and found as a nation. One of the values that Section 3 talks about is the value of adult universal suffrage. What adult universal suffrage means is that a person who is over the age of 18 has the right to vote. Every Zimbabwean who is over the age of 18 has the right to vote in any election. It is only that right is only limited in Schedule 4 of the Constitution. And Schedule 4 says that you may not exercise the right to vote if you are mentally challenged or if you were convicted of an offense, an electoral offense, and you are declared to be ineligible as a voter, or of course if you are insolvent. So any Zimbabwean who is not mad, who is not insolvent, and who is not an election criminal has the right to vote, protected by Section 3. So if we again go to Section 3 itself, you will find that it talks about the authority to govern coming from the people. So the president's authority to govern must come from the people. It doesn't say from parliament, it says from the people. It goes on to say further that when people get vested rights, those rights are protected. So if, like Rachwara, I have voted over and over again for the president, I now have vested rights in that election, and those vested rights should not be taken. Now, how does this affect the Bill of Rights? By operation of Section 46 of the Constitution. Section 46 of the Constitution talks about when interpreting the Constitution. And it says, when interpreting the Constitution, you must do so in a manner that promotes values and principles that underlie a democratic society based on openness, justice, human dignity, equality, and freedom. And in particular, the values and principles set in Section 3. That is adult universal suffrage. The right of any Zimbabwean who is not mad, who is not insolvent, who is not a convicted election offender to vote in any election. As long as you are 18 years, you are allowed to vote. And this is what is called, is meant by adult universal suffrage. This was an ideal of the armed struggle. The people went to war. Among other things, they wanted the right to vote. In fact, they say, they use the similar words. We want adult universal suffrage. One man, one vote. Of course, they should have said one person, one vote at that point in time. But they talked about universal adult suffrage. Now, Section 67 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe is in the Bill of Rights. And Section 67, subsection 3, says that every Zimbabwean above the age of 18 has the right to vote. In other words, the rights that are given in Section 67 are the rights to universal adult suffrage. And universal adult suffrage in our Constitution is only limited where one is mental challenges, convicted electoral offender, or is insolvent. So Section 67 provides for political rights. Every Zimbabwean above the age of 18 has the right to vote. Now, what this bill now does is that it then says every Zimbabwean who is above the age of 18 cannot vote in the presidential election unless they are a member of parliament. That means, therefore, the Bill of Rights is being amended. The political rights that were given to the people of Zimbabwe are being amended, and amended by taking away the right of the Zimbabwean person to vote for president. It is amended by taking away the vested rights that people who have voted before have now acquired by virtue of their voting. Therefore, this amendment affects the Bill of Rights. And because it affects the Bill of Rights, it must go for referendum. Ladies and gentlemen, it is very, very clear that the political rights which are contained in the Bill of Rights are being affected. And therefore, there is need for a referendum. There is a need not only for one referendum, but for two referendums. The first referendum is to determine whether the Zimbabweans want the extension of term or not. That is, whether the president's term from 5 years must be changed to 7 years. That is the first referendum. The second referendum is coming by virtue of Section 328, and it is whether President Mnangagwa must benefit from the extension of term. With the greatest of respect, the press conference at which Honorable Mangwana was asked to speak, and it is very easy to see from the body language that he does not believe in what he's talking about. It is very, very clear for all of us who know him. It is very, very clear that what he is talking there does not make sense. He is a man who was involved in the crafting of this constitution and who knows the intention of the legislature. And the intention of the legislature was to protect the values of the liberation struggle. If you go to the preamble of this constitution, you see us talking about the respect of the values of the liberation struggle. If you go to chapter 2 of this constitution, you see us talking about the respect of the values of the liberation struggle. One of the values of the liberation struggle was universal adult suffrage, the right of a Zimbabwean person to vote in an election, and more importantly, to vote for the president. And we have already demonstrated that extension by 2 years is an extension, but it is an extension which does not constitute a full term. Something which is not a full term is probably a quarter term or a half term or a 3/4 term, but it is not nothing. It is something. It is an extension. and that extension is covered by our laws. You deal with it in terms of Section 328. And the more we look at this, the more we see how the Zimbabweans tried to safeguard their rights, including the right to vote. Ladies and gentlemen, the Parliament of Zimbabwe has published a schedule of meetings at which they want to hear the views of the people of Zimbabwe. They have also asked the Zimbabweans to put their submissions in writing. I want to inform you that the Movement for Democratic Change is making its written submissions in accordance with what the Parliament has asked it to do. We urge all of the people of Zimbabwe to turn up in their numbers at these public hearings. But you will also notice that these so-called public hearings are mere tokenism. For example, in Mashona and the West, I think there is no hearing in Murombedzi, Chinoi, which other area, Karoi, and so on. We don't have public hearings at all. And I think in Harare we have 2. In a city of more than 4 million people, you have 2 centers. So this is mere tokenism to hoodwink the people that they've been consulting. This is a fiat accompli, and so on. We have also noticed that there is growing violence and inequality that is being propagated in this country. ZANU-PF, day in, day out, are having their meetings where they are promoting this bill. In effect, they have doubled their efforts to promote this bill. They are being allowed to do that in full freedom. But other political parties are not being allowed to hold meetings. For example, in October last year, the MDC meeting in Bulawayo was attacked by thugs who called themselves Timyamdara. And they were against anybody who was against the 2030 agenda. We have seen the disruption of Professor Maduk's meeting at his headquarters at 348 Chitepo Avenue, where he was brutalized and beaten in the presence of the police. And up to now, of course, Zimbabweans will be pleasantly surprised that nobody has been arrested. So we have the issue of deja vu. What happened in 2008 is happening again now. The